bray, and I'm 79, I'll be 80 this year, and this is my home, and this is my permaculture garden here. Our current planet, well, there are many problems with our current planet. In some countries there's overpopulation, in many countries there's pollution, in some parts of the world you've got extreme wealth, and in other places poverty. You've got endangered plants and animals dying, and there's quite a lot of issues in Australia to do with animals and plants that need to be protected.
Okay, great. Can you tell us about the benefit of permaculture for you and for the environment?
Okay, permaculture is a system of gardening or farming that is designed by two people, two Australians, David Holmgren and the late Bill Morrison. And it's a way of working with the land to provide a sustainable way of living. And this can be done on a small scale, on this small house block here, or it can be done on a farm. And for that you need to observe and interact, look at the land, and you need to catch and store energy. And here on this property we have the solar panels on the roof and the battery, that energy. We collect water off the roof, and we have, through a drainage system and through the use of our garden beds, storing water. Any trees or wood or weeds or anything from this property we put back into the soil, so we're storing energy in that way as well. So that's what we do. With permaculture too, you want to obtain a yield, and as you look around my garden here, I've got herbs, I've got apple trees, I've got a mulberry, a pomegranate, lemon, pears, I've got blackberries, blueberries, strawberries, I've got other vegetables, I've got garlic, beetroot, and different times of the year I have different vegetables, and it's lovely to be able to use it and also to share it with my friends. One of the things about permaculture, you have to be prepared for people to question what you're doing, and if they think they've got a better way or they want to correct you, be able to accept the correction and feedback. It's important to reuse the resources we have, and here in this garden bed we've taken an old bath from the rubbish tip, and there's more over here, and I've turned them into wicking beds, which are a water-saving form of gardening, and it's just old materials we reuse. These pieces of tin here were from the building of the house, and they were going to throw them out. We try not to produce any waste. There is some always, but we keep that at a minimum. We always make sure we've designed properly, and another thing with permaculture is integrating rather than segregating. So in my garden you'll find flowers and vegetables and trees all growing in together. We use small solutions. It's taken me quite a while to get the garden to this level, 2.5 years to get it to this level, but that's all right. I'm happy to be slow. We value having diversity, things in together. We use the edges of things, and I try to respond creatively to the changes that happen. And as I'm getting older, there's some forms of gardening I can't do, and I'm doing other sorts. So that's a little bit about permaculture. There's a lot of water issues in Australia. First of all, we have a lot of underground water. So this is water that probably fell as rain hundreds of years ago. And in the central part of Australia, many of these people have put down bores and the water is coming up, but the tap hasn't been turned off, and a lot of the water is wasted. Where you have mining companies come into the area, that water is damaged and the water table is altered. In an area like this, we have the spa water, and in some drink companies come and use it, and it lowers the water table in the whole area, and so the farmers haven't got the groundwater as they used to have. That's one issue. The second issue is the fact that most of the eastern state rivers drain down through Queensland, through New South Wales, Victoria, and exit into the Murray River and exit in South Australia. And we've had a lot of drought, and so that people have planted things when there was plenty of water, and now they haven't got enough. We've got big companies, big multinational companies establishing rice farms and other big farming ventures, and they are right upstream and they take the water, and by the time the water gets down to South Australia, it's quite salty, because Australia 600 million years ago was, the middle of it was a seabed, and there's a lot of salt. You've also got issues of law to do with water, because we have the different governments in different states, and we have people rorting the system, and there are disputes over water. Recently, because a lot of water was taken upstream, we had massive fish kills, and we're talking about fish that might be 100 years old that are dying. I don't know if you've seen any of the photos of that, but I can get you some photos of that in places like Menindee and in there where they've never run dry. Now it's running dry, so that's big problems with water. So we try to conserve water as much as possible, and this particular town, Daysleford, is on permanent water saving regulations. It's a tourist town. The tourists come in, they have 15 spas a day and they take the water. The locals, we try to have our 5-minute showers or less, and we try to save the water as much as we can.
Okay, great. For the last question, I know. Just tell us about the bushfire that ravaged Australian territory.
Okay, before the white people came to Australia, the Aboriginal people lived here in harmony and sustainably with the land. For some reason or other, the British wrote on the map that it was terra nullius, nobody lives here. But in actual fact, the Aboriginal people had been in relationship with this land here for 60,000 years or even more. Now, Aboriginal people lived in small family groups and several interconnecting groups into clans that would meet from time to time. They travelled in a semi-nomadic way over fixed areas of the land from which they had their dreamtime stories, myths and legends, and out of that came their law, their music and their art. And also their cultural practices of cultural burning. This meant while they were travelling, going from one area to another one, maybe 2 days walk away, they would just throw down fire, and a small area of several hectares or several acres would burn. And they did this all the time, and they all did it. So there were small, frequent burns. The Australian landscape has in it the eucalyptus tree, which are very volatile, and they burn very hot and very fiercely. You're right. When the white people came, they fenced off the land. They fenced off the water holes. There was massive genocide of Aboriginal people, and we must use that word. They pretend it didn't happen, but people died through disease introduced from Europe. These people had never met measles, tuberculosis, smallpox. People died from rape, from murder. The people died down, and the population was decimated, and the cultural practices of burning stopped, and we had fences, and we had eucalyptus trees and grass under them that hadn't burned for 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years. And you suddenly get a massive build-up of very volatile, very dry, burnable product. And so when we get the fires, they're bad, they're really bad. So instead of the cultural practices, which was small amounts all the time, we get these massive fires. And this year, our government, the last few years, they haven't spent very much on fire protection, and in different states there's been a lot of trouble. Last year in June, July, August, September, 50 of the fire chiefs tried to talk to our Prime Minister. This fire season is going to be bad. But he was not interested, and he refused to talk to them, and he went to Hawaii for his holidays in the middle of the fire season. We'd already started the fires in September, October, November, December, and in November my brother-in-law's house and farm was destroyed, and his 3 motorbikes. His motor guzzi and his, very bad. So the fire has come, and the Prime Minister had to come home, and even then he wasn't so, money should be spent on protective, the burning in summertime, in wintertime, clearing it down, the paying of people. Most of the people that fought the Australian fires were volunteers, and they were giving up their holidays to fight the fires, and they worked 12 hours, 18 hours without sleep, and you all saw the pictures, and that was bad. And it's a big political issue, this fires. So they've come and they've burnt, and some of them are still burning, and it's now March, and probably they'll keep burning until perhaps April, and then they'll start again in September. So the fire in Australia, it has to do with the absence of cultural burning, the lack of funding of the fire services, the fact that it's volunteers mostly doing it in the country areas, and that our vegetation is such that it burns a lot. So it's got there are a lot of problems relating to it. Unfortunately, in that time, I don't know whether 30 people died, I don't know how many died this year, but in 2009, or was it 7, 150 people in Victoria died, and that fire came up very quickly. The firemen and police were knocking on doors telling people to get out, and they came to a point where there were more houses and the men had to stop and run for their lives. And it is a tragedy, and we need to spend much more thinking. One of our governments, the Liberal government, at one stage stopped the position of the chief scientist. We don't need a chief scientist, he said, but we do. They don't follow the science, they follow what they've got in their minds, and it's a political issue. But much more has to be done, and there's a lot of very angry people. During the bushfires, many plants and animals were killed, and some endangered species were probably wiped out, and a lot more has to be done, and it'll be some years before it recover. But you think of the people's lives. For every, I think we've lost, was it 2,000 or 3,000 homes, and already in these months, my brother-in-law he was burnt in November, he got back 3 pairs of second-hand shorts and 3 shirts. That's all he's got. Yet millions of dollars were raised, and some people get money and some people don't, and there's a lot of trouble with that. So it's a lot of political things to do with it. But the fire is bad. But the Aboriginal people, our First Nation, our Indigenous people, they knew how to use fire sustainably. They used to, as they walked, they'd burn the grass, and then up the green grass would come, and the kangaroos would come, and then they'd get the kangaroos for their food. That's just a little bit about the fires. Here, this house has got a 12.9 rating, so it's specially built to prevent it being burnt in this area, and that's a new rule that's come in with new houses. How's that?